My name is Deborah. I'm 38 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my family made it painfully clear that I was invisible except when it came to money. You see, they adored my sister Amanda, the golden child who arrived early and fragile, instantly becoming the center of attention and forever the favorite. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one who learned early that the only way to survive was to be useful, to stay silent, and to give until I had nothing left. When Amanda was born prematurely, everything changed. My dad rushed off to the hospital in the dead of night, and my Aunt Jennifer became my temporary guardian. The house transformed into a fragile ecosystem revolving around Amanda's health. If I sneezed or coughed, it wasn't my well-being they worried about, it was whether I might bring some invisible threat to their precious princess. I spent more nights at my grandma's or with Aunt Jennifer than in my own home. At first, I thought it was just an adventure, but slowly it became clear I was sidelined. Desperate to win even a sliver of their approval, I buried myself in schoolwork, earned every award I could, and tried to shine. But Amanda's health crises always stole the spotlight. I remember bringing home my science fair trophy, pride swelling in my chest, only to be told, "That's nice, dear, but have you washed your hands? Amanda's feeling under the weather." That trophy was quickly shoved aside, as though my achievements were just background noise. By the time Amanda was 7 and healthy enough to stop the constant worrying, the damage was done. She realized how to wield that power and used it ruthlessly. Any moment she wanted attention or something special, she'd feign vulnerability, and the house would spin around her needs. My parents, locked in their roles as protectors of the fragile, never saw how it crushed me. High school was no different. My science teacher praised my potential for a scholarship, and I felt a flicker of hope. But the phone rang. Amanda had lost her favorite pen. My parents dropped everything to comfort her, and my future suddenly became less important than a lost writing tool. After that, my school events became ghost towns for my family. When I won the state debate championship, the trophy was hidden away. "Amanda doesn't like seeing other people's awards," my mom said matter-of-factly. College was supposed to be my fresh start. I earned a full-ride scholarship to State University. The day I came home for a visit, Amanda barely looked up and said, "Finally, you can move out. I want 3 monitors and a streaming setup in your room." My own sanctuary felt invaded before I'd even unpacked. Those college years flew by, and by 23, I had a decent job at Thompson & Company. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. One day, I stumbled onto a financial investing course online. The instructor made it seem like a secret only a few knew, and I took the plunge. I sacrificed meals, skipped outings, and poured every extra cent into learning how to make my money grow. Slowly but surely, my investments flourished. A tiny AI startup I backed tripled in value in months. Then a biotech firm skyrocketed. Before I knew it, I was making more from my portfolio than my job salary. That's when I quit. I kept the family dinners going, maybe out of habit, maybe hoping the tides would turn. At those dinners, Amanda reigned supreme. She was attending Carleton University, a prestigious private school my parents boasted about endlessly. Meanwhile, my mom sighed over bills and tuition, whispering about loans as if my achievements never existed. One night, I overheard them planning to funnel some of my hard-earned money to Amanda for interview outfits and keeping appearances. I wanted to scream. I was the one who built that money from scratch while they dismissed me. But I stayed silent. When I finally bought my own apartment outright with no mortgage, I mentioned it casually on a call with Mom. She barely looked up from the papers on her desk. "Just don't spend too much," she warned. I smiled. If only she knew. Thanksgiving was the yearly showdown. The catered food arrived on time, and I helped set up, all while checking my investments in the background. As usual, Amanda was the star, her achievements toasted, her future lauded. Then came the meltdown. Amanda grabbed my laptop and, without warning, displayed my bank balance on the screen for everyone to see. $10 million. The room fell silent. Her eyes widened, trembling as she whispered, "10 million. My parents' faces twisted shock, anger, disbelief. My mom's voice cracked with accusation. "You let us struggle all this time. How could you be so selfish?" My dad was furious, calling me ungrateful. For years, I had been the invisible one, the provider, the overlooked daughter. Now, I was the target. Yet, in that moment, I saw clearly for the first time my money was mine, every dollar earned with grit and sacrifice. I told them the truth. I hadn't kept it a secret, they just never asked. Amanda scoffed, trying to diminish me, but I had no patience left for her games. I stood tall and said no. No more being a bank account, no more silent suffering. The fallout was immediate. Their outrage spilled into calls, texts, social media posts painting me as the villain, but I had drawn my line. I stopped the monthly transfers. I blocked their calls and messages. I built walls where there had been open wounds. For the first time, I felt free. After that Thanksgiving meltdown, the silence that followed was deafening but not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that thrums with tension, like a storm waiting to break. I thought cutting off the money would be the end, that the family drama might simmer down. Instead, it unleashed a wave of guilt trips, manipulation, and outright hostility. At first, the calls came almost immediately. Mom's voice would crack with fake despair. "Deborah, please think about your poor sister. She's struggling. We're all struggling." Dad's tone was colder, more commanding. "You owe us. Family takes care of family." And Amanda? She shifted from the bratty sister to the wounded victim overnight, sobbing in voicemail messages, blaming me for her stalled career and mounting debts. I tried to respond once or twice, trying to explain my position that I wasn't the family ATM, that I had boundaries, but it was like shouting into a void. Every word twisted, every boundary challenged. Then came the subtle invasions. My social media accounts were flooded with concerned messages from distant relatives and so-called family friends. People I hadn't heard from in years suddenly took sides. "How can you be so heartless? Don't forget where you came from. Family first. Always." One of my cousins even sent me a thinly veiled warning disguised as advice. "You don't want to burn bridges, Deb. You never know when you'll need them." But what bridge was there to burn? It felt like I'd been wandering in the dark for years, and only now had finally turned on the light. The tension crept into every family event. When I stopped attending Saturday dinners, the few that weren't Amanda's spotlight performances, I was branded the black sheep, the selfish one who abandoned her family. My absence became the main topic of whispered conversations, the cold looks, the social exclusion. At work, the stress weighed on me. It wasn't just the financial strain of dealing with the fallout, but the emotional exhaustion. Every phone buzz made my heart leap with anxiety. Was it another guilt trip? Another demand? I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. One evening, after a particularly tense day, I sat alone in my apartment, the city lights flickering through the window. I realized how isolated I'd become. The family I thought I had was a mirage, and now, even the relatives I'd hoped to lean on were pulling away. But amidst that isolation, something else stirred a quiet, simmering strength. I had survived years of neglect and manipulation. I had built this life from scratch. No amount of guilt or gaslighting would make me give up my hard-won freedom. I began to withdraw further, not out of anger, but self-preservation. I stopped answering calls unless they came from people who truly mattered. I deleted social media apps from my phone to escape the constant barrage of toxic messages. I turned inward, focusing on my investments, my work, and slowly, on myself. It wasn't easy. The guilt was a relentless companion, whispering doubts and fears. Was I truly justified? Had I failed my family? But then I remembered every birthday I spent alone, every achievement ignored, every sacrifice unseen. I wasn't responsible for their choices or their happiness. Meanwhile, the family's behavior grew more desperate. Rumors about me spread that I was stingy, ungrateful, even cruel. Amanda's version of events painted me as a villain who abandoned her in her time of need. The people who once praised Amanda now looked down on me. One day, I discovered my parents had been snooping. They tried to access my apartment when I wasn't home. The building's front desk manager called me in a panic, describing a scene of confrontation and threats. I changed the locks, installed new security cameras, and made sure no one could enter without my knowledge. This invasion only strengthened my resolve. I wasn't just protecting my money or my home anymore, I was protecting my sanity. I started confiding in Sarah again, my college friend and the only person who had stood by me unconditionally. We talked for hours about boundaries, self-worth, and survival. She reminded me that love isn't supposed to feel like this, not like walking on eggshells, not like being a punching bag. "Deb," she said firmly one night, "you're not just surviving, you're reclaiming your life." With her encouragement, I began to see the toxicity for what it was, a chain I was finally breaking free from. But the family drama wasn't done with me yet. Amanda's tantrums escalated. At one point, she even tried to sabotage my relationships, spreading lies to my friends and colleagues. My parents fueled the fire, sending out messages claiming I was selfish and cruel, making sure everyone knew about my refusal to support Amanda financially. I kept my head down and focused on facts. I gathered every bank statement, every text message, every voicemail. I started documenting the financial abuse, the emotional manipulation. It was exhausting but necessary. One night, after a particularly harsh exchange, I sat with my laptop open and drafted a letter, a formal warning that if the harassment didn't stop, I would seek legal counsel. I sent it to my parents, Amanda, and a few family friends who had become unwilling participants in the drama. The response was a mix of shock and anger. My parents doubled down on their claims, accusing me of tearing the family apart. Amanda's social media posts became more frantic, begging for sympathy and painting herself as the victim of a cold-hearted sister. I blocked them all. And for the first time in my life, I felt what peace tasted like: bitter. Yes, but real. The calm I found after cutting them off didn't last long. What I thought would be the end was just the beginning of uncovering layers of betrayal I hadn't dared to imagine. It started with a phone call from my cousin, Rachel, the one family member who hadn't disappeared or taken sides. "Deb, you need to know something," she said, voice low, urgent. "I found some documents at Mom and Dad's place, stuff that doesn't add up." I listened, heart pounding, as she explained. She'd stumbled on a stack of bank statements, receipts, and emails that suggested my parents had been siphoning money from my investments, the very money they claimed to need so desperately to support Amanda. Worse, Amanda had been complicit, pushing for funds with false promises of paying back loans that were never intended to be repaid. "Deb, I'm sorry I didn't say anything before. I didn't want to get involved. But it's not right." I thanked her, feeling a mix of relief and rage. After years of being the family's financial scapegoat, I finally had proof that my money had been used against me, hidden beneath layers of lies. That night, I pored over the documents Rachel sent me. There it was in black and white: unauthorized withdrawals, transfers disguised as loans, inflated bills for medical expenses and school fees. The pattern was clear: they had been living off my investments, masking their desperation with fabricated stories. The betrayal cut deeper than I expected. It wasn't just about money, it was about trust, respect, and the cruel lengths they went to exploit me. I realized I couldn't fight this alone. That's when I reached out to Sarah, my rock through the storm. I laid everything out: the financial manipulation, the emotional blackmail, Amanda's lies. Sarah didn't hesitate. "Deb, this isn't just family drama anymore. This is fraud and emotional abuse. We need to protect you legally and emotionally." We started by organizing all my evidence: bank records, texts, emails, witness statements from Rachel and a few other relatives who'd quietly noticed the family's strange financial behaviors. We built a timeline showing how their requests for money coincided suspiciously with my growing investment portfolio. Sarah connected me with a forensic accountant, a woman named Janet, who specialized in uncovering hidden assets and financial misdeeds in family disputes. Janet's meticulous work exposed even more than I'd found: secret accounts, unexplained cash flows, even a company Amanda was using as a front for funneling money. Armed with this evidence, Sarah drafted a powerful cease and desist letter warning my parents and Amanda that any further attempts to access my funds or harass me would result in immediate legal action. The letter landed like a thunderclap. Suddenly, the family's veneer of control cracked. My parents called less often, their voices replaced by silence and then awkward attempts at reconciliation through third parties. Amanda's social media posts turned bitter, laced with accusations that I was cold and ungrateful but no longer with the public support she once enjoyed. During one of the rare family gatherings, a funeral no less, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. I watched as my parents avoided my gaze, as Amanda's usual bravado faltered under the weight of whispered questions from relatives about the financial dispute. In the weeks that followed, whispers of their precarious financial situation spread through the family network. My parents had drained their savings, maxed out credit cards, and even borrowed money from friends, all to keep up appearances. The truth about their reckless spending and my investments became the topic of hushed conversations. Yet, despite the chaos, I felt an unexpected calm. I was no longer the invisible daughter, no longer the one expected to sacrifice everything without recognition. I was a force to be reckoned with, informed, prepared, and protected. Sarah encouraged me to take steps to safeguard my assets further. We restructured my investments, moved accounts into trusts, and set up legal barriers to prevent unauthorized access. Every precaution was a step away from the past and a step toward reclaiming my peace. But the biggest blow came when my parents' reckless attempts to cover Amanda's mounting debts were uncovered by creditors. Lawsuits began piling up, threatening to bankrupt them. Amanda faced calls from lenders and former investors, her glamorous future dissolving into a mess of unpaid bills and legal troubles. One evening, as I sat sipping tea in my apartment, Sarah called with news. "Deborah, the creditors are finally pressing charges against your parents for fraud and financial misconduct, and Amanda's being investigated for falsifying loan applications." I closed my eyes, a flood of emotions crashing over me: vindication, sorrow, relief. The family I'd given everything to had collapsed under the weight of their own deceit. Their desperate attempts to control me had backfired spectacularly. But I didn't revel in their ruin. Instead, I focused on healing. I enrolled in therapy to process the years of neglect and betrayal, rebuilding my self-worth beyond the shadows of family expectations. I reconnected with Sarah, my chosen family, and friends who saw me as I truly was: resilient, kind, and worthy. Slowly, I began to envision a future that wasn't defined by their toxic patterns. I started volunteering with organizations supporting survivors of financial abuse and toxic family dynamics, channeling my pain into purpose. Sharing my story became a way to empower others trapped in similar webs. One morning, standing on my balcony watching the sunrise, I felt something I hadn't in years: peace. The journey had been long and painful. I'd lost the family I thought I had, but found myself in the process. The betrayal was deep, but so was my strength. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. And this time, the story was mine. The day I decided to take action was the day I finally shed the weight of years of silent suffering. The proof was in my hands: every fraudulent transaction, every manipulated document, every whispered lie had been uncovered and documented. It was time for the reckoning. I remember sitting in Sarah's office, my hands trembling but my resolve steel strong. She looked at me and said, "Deborah, this will shake the foundation of your family, but you're ready. This is your moment." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. The moment I'd feared but secretly hoped for had arrived. Our plan was clear. We filed formal complaints with the authorities about the financial fraud my parents and Amanda had perpetrated. We engaged the family's creditors, sharing the evidence to protect myself from any collateral damage or mistaken claims. The legal battle wasn't pretty. It was messy, public, and emotionally draining. The news spread fast. Family secrets splashed across town like wildfire. Friends, neighbors, even distant relatives were shocked, some taking sides, others staying silent, afraid to get caught in the crossfire. My parents reacted as I expected, with fury, denial, and desperate attempts to salvage their reputation. My mother sent me tearful emails begging for mercy, painting herself as a victim of circumstance. My father refused to answer my calls, hiding behind a facade of stubborn pride. Amanda. She went on the offensive. Social media became her battleground. She crafted posts accusing me of greed and betrayal, trying to turn public opinion against me. But this time, the world saw through her performance. The narrative I shared, backed by hard evidence, resonated with those who had experienced similar family betrayals. One night, after a particularly grueling hearing, I found myself sitting alone in my apartment, the silence broken only by the hum of the city outside. I thought about how far I'd come from the overlooked daughter, invisible and unheard, to the woman who stood up and faced her family's lies head-on. That strength came at a cost. I lost friends who sided with my family, endured whispered rumors, and weathered the emotional toll of reliving wounds I'd tried to bury. But for every loss, I gained clarity, peace, and a community of supporters who lifted me up. The court proceedings dragged on for months. I sat through depositions where my parents tried to twist the truth, painting themselves as generous providers and victims of my cold ambition. Amanda's testimony was shaky, her confident mask cracking as inconsistencies surfaced. Sarah was relentless, dismantling their claims with precision and compassion. Her courtroom presence was fierce, but always fair. She reminded me to stay focused on the goal, reclaiming my life and preventing others from suffering the same fate. The turning point came when Janet, the forensic accountant, testified. She laid bare the intricate web of deceit, the hidden accounts, the fake invoices, the diverted funds, all tied directly to my parents' and Amanda's hands. The judge's expression shifted from skepticism to disbelief as the evidence piled up. At the end of the trial, the judge ruled in my favor. My parents were ordered to repay a significant portion of the funds stolen from me and were placed under probation for their financial misconduct. Amanda faced penalties for fraud, including community service and mandatory financial counseling. The legal victory was bittersweet. It didn't erase the years of pain or the fractured relationships, but it was a powerful validation of my truth. I was no longer the powerless daughter. I was a survivor and a victor. After the trial, the family I once knew began to unravel. My parents' reputation in the community was tarnished. They faced social isolation and financial hardship. Amanda struggled to rebuild her life, humbled and forced to confront the consequences of her actions. Meanwhile, I reclaimed my home, my financial independence, and most importantly, my peace of mind. I invested in my self-therapy, self-care, and nurturing friendships that honored and respected me. One evening, Sarah and I sat in my living room, sharing a quiet glass of wine. "You did something incredible, Deborah. You didn't just protect yourself, you stopped the cycle." I smiled, the weight finally lifting from my shoulders. I had to, for me and for anyone else who's been trapped in silence. Looking back, I see now that the hardest part wasn't the confrontation or the fallout. It was believing in myself enough to fight back. I learned that family isn't about blood alone. It's about respect, honesty, and love, the kind that doesn't come with conditions or price tags. My story isn't unique. There are so many out there who suffer in silence, who sacrifice everything for toxic ties. If you're reading this and it resonates, know this: you're not alone. You deserve better. You have the strength to break free. And sometimes, the greatest revenge is simply choosing yourself and refusing to be anyone's victim anymore. The courtroom battles ended months ago, but the silence that followed was deafening. I'd won the legal war, but healing from the wounds left by my family's betrayal was an entirely different journey. The victory felt hollow at times, a bittersweet reminder of everything I'd lost and everything I had fought for. In the weeks after the verdict, the dust settled on the ruins of what used to be my family. News spread through social circles and online forums, the story of the favored sister's meltdown, the parents' deception, and my quiet but relentless fight. I was both lauded and vilified, but I had grown thick skin. The opinions no longer stung. They were noise, background static to a life I was finally reclaiming. I spent hours alone in my apartment, a sanctuary I'd fought to keep. The city lights spilled through the windows, casting long shadows over the clean, minimalist space I now called home. For the first time, it felt truly mine, a space untainted by judgment or expectation. I could breathe. Therapy became my anchor. Each session was a dive into the deep, tangled roots of my childhood wounds, the favoritism, the neglect, the endless gaslighting. The grief was raw and sometimes overwhelming, but slowly, piece by piece, I began to piece myself back together. One of the hardest lessons was learning to forgive, not for their sake, but for mine. Forgiving my parents and Amanda did not mean forgetting or excusing their actions. It meant releasing the grip of resentment that had kept me chained to the past. It meant choosing peace over bitterness. Outside of therapy, I began to build a new tribe: friends, mentors, and colleagues who saw me for who I truly was, a woman of strength, resilience, and grace. Sarah remained a constant, not just my lawyer, but a trusted confidant and friend. She reminded me often, "You rewrote your story. Deborah, you're the author now." I found joy in small things: tending to my little balcony garden, discovering new cafes, and volunteering with a local group supporting adults recovering from emotional abuse. Helping others became a balm, a way to channel my pain into purpose. I also reconnected with my Aunt Jennifer, who had quietly supported me throughout. Her home, filled with warmth and genuine laughter, became a refuge. Over coffee and long talks, she helped me remember who I was beyond the shadow of my family's dysfunction. Financially, I continued to grow my investments cautiously. No longer was money just a means of survival or a tool for approval. It became freedom, the power to choose my path without strings attached. The holidays were the toughest. The empty chair at the dinner table was a sharp reminder of the family I had lost, or rather, the family I had left behind. But I learned to create my own traditions: quiet evenings with close friends, potlucks filled with laughter, and sometimes, simply a night of reflection and gratitude for the peace I'd carved out. One Christmas Eve, I received a message from Amanda. It was hesitant, a stark contrast to her usual brazen tone. She wrote, "I'm sorry. I see now what I didn't before. I hope someday we can find a way back." I didn't respond immediately. Forgiveness takes time, and rebuilding trust takes longer. That message was a turning point, not a reconciliation, but a beginning. It reminded me that healing is not linear. It's messy, complicated, and deeply personal. Looking back, I realize how much strength it took to break free from the toxic patterns that had defined my family for so long. It wasn't just about money or betrayal. It was about reclaiming my voice, my worth, and my right to live on my terms. I am not the daughter they wanted me to be. I am not the shadow of my sister's light. I am Deborah, a woman who dared to stand up, who chose herself over comfort, who forged a path through fire and came out stronger. To anyone reading this who feels trapped in a toxic family dynamic, know this: you deserve love that lifts you up, not chains that hold you down. You have the power to write your own story, to break the cycle, and to find your own peace. Walking away from my family was the hardest decision I ever made, but standing firm in my truth was the bravest, and in that courage, I found freedom. Thank you for sharing this part of my journey. If my story resonates with you, I hope it gives you the strength to choose yourself, to heal, and to find your own true home wherever that may be. Story 2. My name is Serafina Voss. I'm 34 years old, and 2 weeks ago, I woke up $750,000 in debt without a single signature from me on the papers. It sounds impossible, but that's exactly how my life spiraled out of control, all because of family. I was sitting in my home office one golden afternoon, the late sun filtering through the blinds, sorting through a stack of receipts, when my laptop pinged. An email from Pinnacle Trust Bank, urgent missed payment on Voss Ventures loan. I frowned. Voss Ventures, I'd never heard of it. Clicking open the message, my heart stopped cold. The loan was under my name, Serafina Voss, as a co-signer alongside Derek Voss, my cousin. Derek, who'd spent last summer bragging at the family reunion about his game-changing startup. The loan was for $750,000 and payments were overdue. I hadn't signed anything, not a single document. Panic fluttered through me like a trapped bird. I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and called the bank. The man on the other end confirmed the nightmare. My name was on a business loan for Derek's startup, backed by a notarized agreement dated the weekend I stayed at my Aunt Leia's house. I'd left my laptop in the guest room during her birthday party. "There's got to be some mistake," I said, voice tight, heart pounding. He read out my details, my full name, my social security number, and a signature that was supposedly mine. The room spun. I ended the call, staring at the email's black text like an accusation. How could this happen? Memories from that weekend flooded my mind. I'd brought my laptop bag, my ID, tax forms, and work files. I'd left it in the guest room while helping with dinner. Derek had been there, all smiles, asking about my job as a financial analyst, admiring my stability. I thought he was just interested, friendly even. Now, that memory felt tainted. Derek hadn't just been curious, he had been scheming, and Aunt Leia, who always called me the dependable one, must have known what they were doing. They'd taken my trust, my identity, and forged my signature to fund Derek's reckless venture. Shock quickly morphed into fury. My pulse thundered in my ears. I'd spent years supporting this family, Thanksgiving dinners, holiday gifts, even helping Derek polish his resume. And this was how they repaid me, with betrayal that could destroy my future. I sat frozen, the weight of their deceit crushing me, and I knew this was only the beginning. The next morning, I drove to Pinnacle Trust Bank, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. The building's glass facade reflected my unraveling life. Inside, I met Carla, a loan officer. Her smile faded as I explained the situation. "I need to see the loan documents for Voss Ventures," I said, voice steadier than I felt. She pulled up the file and turned the screen toward me. There it was, a contract with my name, complete with a signature that looked eerily like mine, but it wasn't. The S was too sharp, missing the gentle flourish I'd perfected since high school. The forgery was good, almost perfect, but not quite. Carla showed me the details. The loan balance was $742,000, with 2 missed payments flagged. "This is hurting your credit," she said apologetically. "Another missed payment and your score could tank." My hands trembled, fury coursing through me. My credit was spotless, years of careful budgeting, and now it was at risk because of Derek's deception. I requested a copy of the agreement and noticed the notary stamp belonging to a woman named Marjorie Tate, someone I'd never heard of but who was apparently a friend of Aunt Leia's. The pieces clicked into place. The loan's notarization date matched the weekend I was at Leia's, but I'd never signed anything. Back in the bank's sterile waiting room, I replayed the weekend in my mind. Derek had been unusually chatty, hovering while I unpacked in the guest room. "You're killing it at work. Serafina," he'd said, grin too wide. I thought he was just being friendly, maybe fishing for career advice. Now, I saw it for what it was, a distraction while he rifled through my belongings, scanning my ID, maybe even a signed tax form, all to craft that counterfeit signature. The thought made my skin crawl. I'd trusted them, left my things unguarded, and they'd weaponized that trust. Betrayal burned hot inside me. I wasn't just a victim, I was a target. My financial stability, my future, collateral for Derek's failing crypto app. I climbed back into my car, fury fueling every movement. I pulled out a notebook and started jotting down every detail: the bank emails, Carla's words, the forged signature. I needed evidence, a shield for the battles ahead. This wasn't just about clearing my name. It was about exposing the full scope of their deception. That afternoon, I drove to Aunt Leia's house, heart pounding, clutching the bank documents. Inside, the scent of lavender candles greeted me, but the warmth felt hollow. Leia was in the kitchen slicing apples. Derek lounged on the couch, scrolling on his phone. "Serafina, what a surprise," Leia said, too brightly. I didn't smile back. "We need to talk about the Voss Ventures loan," I said, laying the papers on the counter. Derek glanced up, face casual, almost bored. I didn't sign anything, I continued, but my name is on a $750,000 loan for your company. He shrugged, leaning back. You're good with money. Serafina, figured you'd help out. His nonchalance hit me like a slap. Leia wiped her hands on a towel. It's family duty. Dear, we all pitch in. Their words twisted the knife deeper, dismissing my violation as some favor I'd volunteered for. I felt like I was shouting into a void. My anger met their infuriating calm. I pressed harder, demanding answers. Derek admitted the loan funded his crypto app, a sure thing that was now bleeding money. It's just a rough patch, he said, waving it off. But you've missed 2 payments, I snapped, citing the bank's report. This is wrecking my credit. Leia tilted her head, voice patronizing. Don't make a fuss. Serafina, we'll sort it out. Their refusal to acknowledge the severity of forging my signature, risking my financial future, left me reeling. It wasn't just the loan, it was the assumption I'd silently carry their burden. Rage surged inside me, mingling with a crushing sense of isolation. These were people I trusted, who shared my childhood, holidays, and now gaslighted me into compliance. But I wasn't broken. This isn't over, I said, steady despite the storm inside. Back in my car, I dialed the number of a lawyer I'd found online, Clarangwen, known for handling fraud cases. I was done just being angry. I was ready to fight. The days after that confrontation were a strange kind of silence. The family group chat, once buzzing with memes and weekend plans, went cold. The cousin who used to send funny videos stopped replying altogether. When I reached out to my uncle, he sent me a cryptic text. Heard you're causing trouble for Derek's business. The words hit me harder than I expected. They weren't just disappointed, they were turning against me. Derek's strategy was clear. He had spun a story painting me as the villain sabotaging his startup, a jealous cousin trying to ruin his big break. At the last family barbecue, a gathering I wasn't invited to, whispers floated that I was selfish, uncaring, an outsider. People I'd shared laughter and secrets with now eyed me like I was an intruder. The isolation was suffocating. Every unanswered message, every ignored call, became another brick in a wall separating me from my own family. But that was just the beginning. One evening, while reviewing my credit report, I noticed something new. An unfamiliar $50,000 credit line had appeared in my name, maxed out to the limit. My stomach clenched, and my hands trembled as I dialed the issuing bank. Yes, this account is linked to a recent application, the representative said, authorized by Serafina Voss, but the signature is questionable. My breath caught. Derek had gone further than the loan. He had opened a credit line using my stolen identity, spending lavishly on marketing events for his crypto app events I'd later see plastered all over social media, rooftop galas, champagne toasts, expensive suits. His reckless disregard wasn't just damaging me financially, it was a full-scale assault on my reputation. I hung up, fury coiling like a serpent in my chest. How far would they go? How much more damage would they cause? But I wasn't about to let them win. I set to work building my fortress. I created a new folder on my laptop, labeled Evidence. Every screenshot of Derek's event posts, every text from my uncle, every statement from the bank went inside. I saved the loan emails, the forged documents, the credit line statements. I made detailed notes about every confrontation with Derek and Aunt Leia. Each keystroke was a small victory, turning my despair into resolve. I was no longer just a victim, I was a fighter. I found the courage to contact Clarangwen, my lawyer. She was everything I needed: sharp, relentless, a master of fraud cases. Your signature's off, she said, flipping through the loan documents. That notary stamp is suspicious, too, but the notary, Marjorie Tate, has a clean record and she's connected to your aunt. If she testifies she saw you sign, it's your word against hers. My stomach dropped. The web was thicker than I imagined. Clarangan laid out the stakes, proving fraud would be difficult, but not impossible. We'd start by freezing the fraudulent credit line, disputing the loan with the bank, and protecting my credit. Then, she hinted at something bolder. "There's a way to turn this around," she said, her eyes gleaming. "We can try to acquire the loan yourself, become the creditor, gain control." The idea shocked me. Not just defending myself, but seizing power from the very people who tried to ruin me. The thought ignited something inside me. For nights, I worked by the soft glow of my desk lamp, cross-referencing dates and documents. I confirmed I'd only been at Laya's for a Saturday dinner, not any signing. I pulled up photos from that weekend, one showing my laptop bag untouched in the guest room. I even dug out my tax forms from that time, pristine and untouched. Every detail was a brick in my defense wall. Clarangan nodded approvingly at my diligence. "This is solid. Now we need a strategy." I learned banks often sold defaulted loans at a discount to cut losses. The loan was now a liability for Pinnacle Trust. If I could buy it, I'd hold the power. I named my new private company Ironwood Trust, after my grandmother's steadfast spirit. I began filing paperwork, researching, and quietly plotting. Clarangan coached me through negotiation scripts and financial jargon. "Precision," she said. "Don't show your hand too soon." With every call, every form filled, my confidence grew. I was no longer the naive cousin caught in a family trap. I was a strategist playing to win. The night I finalized the purchase of the loan for $483,000 using a large portion of my savings, I felt a surge of triumph. I wasn't just surviving, I was reclaiming. Ironwood Trust was no longer just a name. It was my shield, my sword. I sent Derek a formal default notice through Ironwood Trust, demanding repayment. His reaction was immediate and furious. Texts came flooding in. "You're low, Serafina. How dare you threaten your own family?" Their panic was music to my ears. They weren't sorry, they were scared. And I held the reins. But the fight wasn't over. Derek launched social media posts boasting about a supposed major deal to sell his failing app, hoping to dodge his debt. I had already filed a lien on Voss Ventures' assets, a preemptive strike. When Derek's buyer ran a title check, the lien blocked the sale, freezing his escape plan. His frantic emails to the bank landed in my inbox, unaware that I was the one pulling the strings. Clarangan escalated the battle, filing a fraud complaint against Marjorie Tate, the notary. Our evidence linked her to Aunt Leia's orchestration of the scheme. The state board opened an investigation. At the same time, I alerted Pinnacle Trust about the fraudulent credit line Derek had opened in my name. The account was frozen. No more damage. Each legal step felt like reclaiming a piece of my life. Though justice was close, the sting of betrayal lingered. Family ties were frayed beyond repair. Cousins I once trusted, now distant strangers. Laya's betrayal, Derek's greed, sharp wounds I was still healing. But through it all, clarity burned bright. And this wasn't just about money. It was about self-respect, boundaries, and reclaiming my future. I renamed Ironwood Trust to Allion Fund, honoring my grandmother's resilience. The seized assets funded scholarships for women in tech, women like me, deserving a chance to build without betrayal. At home, my condo balcony blossomed with lavender, scents drifting on the evening air. I read legal contracts for pleasure now, their fine print a reminder of my power to shape my destiny. I slept peacefully. No longer the family fixer. I was Serafina Voss, independent, precise, purposeful. This was my life. My legacy. My quiet victory. The air in my condo felt different now, lighter, somehow. I'd shed the weight of silence, the burden of being the family's scapegoat. But freedom came with its own costs. The silence from my relatives was deafening. Invitations stopped. Calls went unanswered. It was as if I'd been erased. Yet, in that void, I found a strange strength. I wasn't alone. Clara was my anchor. She wasn't just a lawyer, she was a strategist, a mentor, and sometimes the voice I needed when anger threatened to swallow me whole. We spent hours piecing together the puzzle Derek and Aunt Leia had tried to hide. Each forged signature, every suspicious date, every whispered excuse they'd thrown my way became evidence, solid, undeniable proof. When Clara uncovered emails between Leia and Marjorie Tate, the notary, instructing how to handle the paperwork, I felt the sting of betrayal sharpen. These weren't careless mistakes, they were calculated moves to exploit me. But I was no longer their pawn. Together, we devised a plan to strike where it hurt most: their credibility. Clara explained the state notary board's power to revoke Marjorie's license and launch a formal investigation. It would expose the fraud publicly and dismantle their cover story. Once they lose that notary license, Clara said, it will send shockwaves through their network. They won't be able to hide behind legal facades anymore. Her confidence fueled my resolve. I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for every person who'd been used, dismissed, or silenced by those they trusted. Meanwhile, the Alien Fund began to take shape. I dedicated myself to transforming the seized assets from Voss Ventures into something meaningful: scholarships for young women in tech who faced barriers like I had. That work became my refuge. Each application I reviewed, each scholarship awarded was a small act of reclamation. A way to turn pain into purpose. Yet the battle wasn't just legal, it was personal and pervasive. At family gatherings, whispers circulated. My name was muttered with disdain. Relatives who once called me dear now sneered money-hungry or cold-hearted. The social smear was relentless. But I held my head high. I no longer needed their validation. Their judgment was the echo of their own failures. One evening, as I sat alone in my living room, my phone buzzed with an unexpected message. It was from my cousin Jenna, the one who had stopped responding. Serafina, I'm sorry for staying silent. I had no idea. If you want, I'm here. Her words caught me off guard. Could bridges really be rebuilt? Or was this just another test? I decided to meet Jenna for coffee. Her eyes were sincere, her voice soft but firm. I was blindsided. She admitted, Derek's version was all I heard, and I was too afraid to question it. We talked for hours, peeling back layers of family politics and pain. Jenna confessed she'd felt trapped, torn between loyalty and doubt. Her support was cautious but genuine. It was the first real olive branch since the chaos began. At the same time, Derek's desperation escalated. Rumors of his app's failure spread, and his social media posts grew increasingly erratic. He started attacking me publicly, accusing me of family betrayal and sabotage, attempting to paint himself as the victim. His antics only deepened my resolve. Clara and I prepared for the next move, pushing for criminal charges against Marjorie Tate and exposing Leia's complicity. The legal filings were meticulous, each page a testament to the months of investigation and evidence gathering. The notary board launched its inquiry, and news began to trickle through the grapevine. Leia's reputation, once untouchable, was crumbling. Family members who had once shielded her began to distance themselves. I watched from afar as their carefully constructed world unraveled. But even in the midst of their collapse, I wrestled with unexpected feelings. The sting of loss lingered, loss of family, of trust, of what could have been. I found myself sitting on my balcony at night, lavender scent in the air, grappling with the paradox of justice and loneliness. Was winning worth the price of fractured relationships? Could I ever forgive them? One afternoon, Clara brought me an update. Marjorie's license is suspended pending investigation. Leia's involvement has been made public. The bank froze the fraudulent credit line. You've protected your credit. Her words felt like a lifeline. I realized I wasn't just surviving, I was reclaiming control over my life and narrative. With a Leon fund gaining momentum, I felt my purpose expand beyond revenge. I began mentoring young women in tech, sharing my story and encouraging them to fight for their own futures. The journey from victim to victor was far from easy, but each step forward was a victory in itself. The family that had tried to bury me now faced the consequences of their choices. And I was free, finally free to build a life defined not by betrayal, but by resilience and hope. The momentum I'd built with Allianz Fund was a lifeline, a beacon in the storm of family betrayal. But the fight was far from over. Derek and Aunt Leia hadn't just stolen from me, they had tried to erase me, and they weren't ready to admit defeat. The day I sent the default notice through Ironwood Trust, declaring Derek's loan overdue and demanding repayment, felt like a turning point. For once, I wasn't the one being cornered, I was the one setting the rules. The text messages came quickly. Derek's first was dripping with venom. "This is low, even for you. Betraying family, you're dead to me." Then Leia's voice, sharp and accusatory, echoed in my inbox. "How dare you threaten us? We did what we had to." And their anger didn't faze me. If anything, it fueled my resolve. This wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. I spent nights cross-referencing every document, every interaction, every piece of evidence with Clara. We planned meticulously, every move had to be precise, airtight, unassailable. Clara explained the importance of controlling the narrative. You can't just win legally. Serafina, you have to win publicly too. People believe what they see. Together, we began preparing to expose the full extent of their deceit to the family, the bank, and even local news outlets if necessary. The notary investigation was the linchpin. Marjorie Tate, the notary who'd vouched for the forged loan, was now under scrutiny. When the state's notary board publicly suspended her license, it sent shockwaves through the family. I received a cryptic message from an old family friend: "The walls are closing in. Leia's panic is something to behold." Indeed, Leia's veneer of calm shattered. I could almost hear her frantic whispers through the grapevine, her attempts to spin the story, deny involvement, and salvage what little remained of her reputation. Meanwhile, Derek's social media feed turned into a chaotic battlefield. He alternated between pleading for sympathy, lashing out at me, and broadcasting empty promises about turning his crypto app around. But the most satisfying moment came when I, through Ironwood Trust, filed a lien on all Voss Ventures assets. Derek's hopes to sell his company to cover debts evaporated overnight. The property listings, the investor pitches, the shiny facades, they all froze in place, blocked by my legal claim. He called the bank repeatedly, his desperation bleeding through the static of voicemail messages I later heard through Clara's updates. One message was particularly revealing. "I know Serafina's behind this. She's trying to ruin me. We're family. She should help me, not destroy me." I smiled bitterly. The irony wasn't lost on me. He believed loyalty meant exploitation. I was here to prove it meant accountability. The family, once so quick to judge me as cold or money-hungry, was unraveling. At holiday dinners I was no longer invited to, whispered conversations unfolded behind closed doors. My name was muttered with grudging respect or thinly veiled contempt. Old allies became strangers. Yet even as the walls closed in around Derek and Leia, I felt the ache of lost connections. I mourned what could have been the family I wished I had, the trust they shattered. One cold evening, I found myself staring at an old photo on my desk, me as a child, smiling with my cousins and Aunt Leia. The memory was bittersweet. I wanted closure, not chaos. That's when Clara suggested an idea that took me by surprise. "What if," she said thoughtfully, "you turn this fight into something bigger, not just about your family, but about anyone who's been exploited or betrayed?" We brainstormed. A Leon Fund could expand beyond scholarships. We could launch an initiative to support victims of financial fraud within families. Workshops, legal aid, mentorship tools to empower the powerless. The thought ignited a new fire inside me. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was a mission. While the legal battles raged on, I devoted myself to building this vision. Each success felt like reclaiming a piece of my soul. But the fight had its costs. Emails from estranged relatives still arrived, some laced with bitterness, others desperate attempts at reconciliation. Aunt Leia's voicemail was a mixture of apologies and thinly veiled threats. Derek's occasional calls were rage-filled demands or pitiful pleas. I didn't respond. Instead, I set firm boundaries. Protecting my peace was now a priority. Late one night, a knock on my door startled me. It was Jenna, my cousin who'd reached out months before. Her eyes were red, but her voice steady. "I wanted to see you in person, to say I'm sorry for not standing up sooner." I let her in. We talked for hours about betrayal, family, and the scars we carried. It was the first time in a long time I felt a flicker of hope that some wounds might heal. But the biggest victory came quietly. The state attorney's office announced formal charges against Marjorie Tate. Her suspension turned into revocation. The notary scandal made headlines. Leia's involvement was spotlighted. Her social standing crumbled. I was no longer the only one fighting. I had the law on my side. As Derek's crypto app floundered and Voss Ventures' assets were liquidated under Allianz Funds management, the chapter was closing. The office, once a symbol of Derek's grand dreams, was now a shell of broken promises. Walking through its empty rooms, I felt a mix of sorrow and satisfaction. The house of cards had fallen. The quiet victories continued. I renamed Ironwood Trust to Allianz Fund, a tribute to my grandmother's strength. The fund wasn't just about money, it was about legacy. Each lease signed, each scholarship awarded was a brick in a new foundation, one built on resilience, justice, and hope. I transformed pain into purpose. At home, my nights were peaceful. Lavender scented the air. Legal contracts and scholarship applications filled my days. Sleep came easier, unburdened by the ghosts of family expectations. I wasn't the pawn anymore. I was the player. The path ahead was uncertain but mine to shape. I learned loyalty wasn't blind. Boundaries weren't betrayals. And sometimes, the fiercest love was love for oneself. I stood on my balcony, city lights twinkling below, breathing in the quiet power of a life reclaimed. This was more than survival. It was transformation. The journey from betrayal to empowerment wasn't easy, but it was mine. And in that, I found peace. Story 3. My name's Leora. I'm 34 years old, and I cashed out my 401k to save our family bakery. Then my mom told me, "Callie's the face now. You've done your part," so I canceled every payment they'd forgotten I made. Weeks later, she texted me, "Please help. This isn't you." I said, "Nothing." Thanks so much for being here with me today. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments below. Now, let's dive right into today's story. Growing up in a small Ohio town, I was always the dependable one. Not the brilliant one, not the beautiful one, just dependable. I didn't ask for much. I showed up when needed, and I stayed out of the spotlight. My younger sister, Callie, was different. She was magnetic, full of energy. and somehow always the center of attention. People gravitated toward her like she was a flame. And my parents, well, they gave her the stage. I had the chores. I was the one wiping flour off my apron by 14 while Callie twirled in dance classes or rehearsed for school plays. When Mom got sick 3 years ago, it was me who put life on hold. Callie had moved to LA chasing dreams I never understood. I stayed, took Mom to doctor's appointments, paid bills when Dad fell behind, ran the bakery 6 days a week, and picked up shifts at the local diner. I never complained. That's what family does, right? Or at least that's what I thought. Even last winter, after surgery, I managed the payroll from my hospital bed. That bakery wasn't just flour and yeast to me, it was memory, duty, legacy. So when Callie showed up 3 months ago, back home just for a bit, I welcomed her with open arms. She was between jobs again, and I figured she'd stay a few weeks, maybe help a little. I smiled, set up a guest room, and never suspected she was here for more than rest. But there was something in the air like the barometer dipping before a storm. Whispered conversations in the bakery, late nights in the office with Dad, my hours quietly cut without explanation. I brushed it off. They wouldn't make moves about the bakery without me. That's what I told myself. But deep down I knew I just wasn't ready to face it. Then came the text from Dad. Can you swing by the bakery around noon? Need to discuss some business things. It was too formal. We usually talked about orders, supplies, the freezer inventory, never business things. I showed up at the bakery's back door. The smell of cinnamon and rising dough greeted me as always, but it didn't calm me. Something felt heavy. I stepped into the office and there they were. Dad sitting stiff with folded hands, and Callie perched like she owned the place. My chair was across from them. An outsider. Leora, thanks for coming, Dad said. Callie gave a tight smile. What's going on? I asked, gripping the chair's armrests. Dad exchanged a glance with Callie, then said, We've been thinking about the bakery's future. I nodded, unsure what was coming. We've decided to transfer ownership to Callie. My heart stopped. He went on, slow and careful. It's not personal, just the smartest long-term move. Callie's got the energy, marketing instincts. She knows social media in ways we don't. I looked at Callie, who avoided my eyes. She's brought in new customers, redesigned the logo, started an online pre-order system. Dad added. And what about the last 12 years? I asked, voice trembling. Who kept the lights on in winter? Who showed up when the head baker quit mid-shift? Dad winced but said nothing. Mom wasn't even there. No soft excuses, no peacemaker, just Dad and Callie. 2 signatures, 1 decision. I gave more than half my life to this place, I said, voice cracking. Callie finally spoke. We're not pushing you out. Maybe you're better in a support role now. Less stress, you had health issues. Dad added, you needed space, you were tired. I stood up, shaking. You're not just taking the bakery, you're taking my job. No one's taking anything, Dad said quickly. We're just rebalancing. I looked at them, 2 faces pretending this was thoughtful, not betrayal. My throat tightened. I turned and left the office without a word. The bakery's sweet smell suddenly too sickly. They planned this, signed the papers, rehearsed their lines, and never once met my eyes. 2 days later, a thick white envelope landed in my mailbox. No return address, just my name printed neatly. Inside was a cold official letter from the family attorney confirming the amended estate plan effective immediately. Callie was the sole heir to all family properties, assets, and the bakery. My hands trembled. They hadn't just taken the bakery, they'd taken the future. I sat on the porch steps in flour-dusted jeans, staring at nothing. My name wasn't even mentioned. Just that previous arrangements were nullified, like I never existed. Tears burned, but I refused to let them fall. Not yet. Instead, My mind dragged me back to cold winter mornings when I'd slept in the bakery's storage room with 2 space heaters running because the pipes froze, to quietly cashing out my 401k just to make loan payments when interest spiked, to birthdays missed, friendships abandoned, and sacrifices made for a dream I thought we shared. Now they handed it all to Callie like a party favor. That evening, I arrived at my parents' house just as the sun was setting. Mom was watering ferns, humming like nothing was wrong. Dad sat on the porch with the local paper. Callie was nowhere. They looked up as I walked in. "Leora," Mom blinked, surprised. "Didn't expect you." I held up the letter. "You changed the will?" Dad shifted uncomfortably, more of an update than a change. "Why didn't you tell me?" My voice was tight. Mom sighed, setting down the watering can. "Because we knew you'd take it badly." "Take it how? Like someone erased?" Her expression hardened. "Leora, you've done a lot for this family. We appreciate it. But Callie's the one who can lead now. She's the face of the brand." I stared. "I built that brand." "No," Mom said quietly. "You held it together. There's a difference." That was it. The moment I knew there was nothing left to fight for, no amount of sacrifice outweighed charm. I searched their faces for remorse, found none. No argument, no shouting, just cold silence. I turned and walked away. This time, they didn't even try to stop me. I didn't announce my absence. No more early calls checking on Dad's meds. No more trips restocking Mom's tea. No more weekends wiping bakery windows or unclogging gutters. No more crates of vegetables from my garden, which I'd supplied quietly for years. No one noticed, or if they did, they said nothing. The silence was sharp but expected. I figured they'd fill the void with Callie's charm and TikTok dances. The silence that settled after I walked away was thick and suffocating. At first, I thought it would be relief, but it wasn't. It was a void, a space where years of my effort, care, and sacrifice once lived, now empty and echoing. For the first week, I didn't answer calls or texts. I deleted notifications, muted social media, and let the dust settle. Callie didn't reach out, at least not directly, but that didn't mean she was silent. 2 weeks after I disappeared from the bakery and their lives, I woke up one morning to a notification Callie had posted a new video. She was at the bakery, dancing behind the counter, lip-syncing to some trendy song. The caption reading "Running the show now had boss babe, #family business, #watch me glow." Her face was radiant, full of confidence. I stared at it long and hard, a knot tightening in my chest. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I was the one who showed up, the one who kept the ovens warm, the bills paid, and the customers happy, the one who put my own dreams on hold, swallowed exhaustion and frustration, and stayed grounded. Now, Callie was the star of the show, and I was the ghost in the wings. The next day, I got a call from the electric company. The voice on the other end was professional, but firm. "We've been trying to reach the primary account holder for the Marchand residence. The account is 30 days overdue." I blinked. 30 days. That meant my parents hadn't paid their electric bill in a month. For years, I'd quietly covered their utilities' automatic payments out of my account. No questions asked. It was just easier that way. When I realized the bill was unpaid, I took care of it again, without telling anyone. And like every other time, they never thanked me. But this time was different. When I logged into their billing portal, I removed my payment method. No calls, no warnings, just silence. I watched from a distance as the cracks began to show. Neighbors whispered that the porch light at my parents' house hadn't been on for nights. Another post from Callie appeared online, apologizing to customers for unexpected delays at the bakery due to a fridge breakdown. I knew the truth: the power had been shut off. Two accounts, same address, same mistake. But I didn't fix it. Let them feel what absence really meant. 4 years I had been the invisible backbone of our family, the silent strength. Now, I was letting it crumble. And for the first time, I felt no guilt. They had made their choice. Let them live with the consequences. I ran into Claire Marston at the farmer's market one breezy Thursday morning. Claire and I had gone to school together, and she still stopped by the bakery now and then. We hadn't talked in a while, but she approached me like she wanted to say something important. I was at the bakery last week, she said, picking up the same bunch of chard I reached for. It feels different without you, she added quietly. I offered a tight smile. Guess they've got it covered now. Claire hesitated, glancing around. Your mom said you weren't doing well, that you'd had a relapse. I blinked. What? She said you were sick again, Claire said carefully, that you'd been overwhelmed, couldn't handle stress, needed time away. My chest tightened. Did she say that in front of people? Claire winced. There were customers. I don't think she meant it in a bad way, but yeah, she meant it exactly like that. I said nothing, paid for my produce, and walked to my car. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I sat there in silence, letting the lie settle. They were rewriting the story again. But this time, it wasn't just cutting me out. They were painting me as unstable, broken, too weak to carry the family. That was the final push I needed. The next morning, I went straight to the credit union where my automatic payments for the bakery's insurance and my parents' mortgage were set up. The clerk looked at me, eyebrows raised. Are you sure about this? I signed the cancellation forms with steady hands. They wanted a version of me that was fragile and broken. Fine. Let's see how that story holds up without me. 3 days later, a storm rolled in, not the kind you name, but enough. The bakery's roof lost a panel. Heavy rain flooded the back hallway. A water main cracked near the walk-in freezer. The bakery closed indefinitely. The insurance had lapsed. They forgot to update the account information. Or maybe they thought I'd keep paying, like always. Either way, the damage was theirs. I didn't gloat, didn't cheer, but a quiet satisfaction settled in my chest. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Mom, please help. This isn't you. You don't do this. I stared at the screen. No apology, no admission, just the same manipulation, dressed as concern. I didn't reply. I deleted the message, turned off my phone. The next morning, it rang before 7 a.m. Caller ID read Callie. I let it ring once, twice. On the third, I picked up, holding the phone between my shoulder and cheek as I poured coffee. Leora, Callie said, voice cracking. I don't know what to do. I stirred oat milk into my coffee. The line was shaky. The utilities got shut off. No power at the bakery. The ovens won't work. The freezer's humming weird. We lost 2 trays of dough. Customers are calling, canceling orders. 3 part-timers quit. They said it's too chaotic. I can't fix this alone. I took a slow sip of coffee. Calmly, I said, you're not alone. You have the bakery now, remember. Silence. Finally, she whispered, I thought you'd want to help. No, it's your name on the walls now, I said quietly. Then I hung up. I didn't feel anger. Just a deep, still clarity. This wasn't revenge. This was reality catching up. 3 days later, my parents showed up at my door, unannounced. I saw them through the kitchen window standing awkwardly on the porch, unsure if they belonged. Dad in his worn cardigan, Mom clutching a folder like a shield. I waited before opening the door. "Hi," I said flatly, not moving aside. Mom forced a smile. "We were hoping to talk." "Go ahead," I said. They exchanged glances, thrown off by my cold tone. "We made a mistake," Dad began. "Things aren't going well with the bakery." I said. Mom took a step forward. "We know you're upset, but this isn't like you. You're punishing us." I looked at her, cold as stone. "You handed over everything I built. You spread lies about my health. You painted me as weak so you could justify it." Mom opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. "You wanted a future without me. Now you have it." The wind stirred the branches above us. Leaves fluttered down and landed on the porch like punctuation. Dad looked down, jaw tight. "We didn't mean—" "But you did," I cut in softly, with signatures and smiles. They shrank in the silence. "I'm not angry anymore," I continued, "but I'm not your safety net." Mom's voice wavered. "So that's it. You're done with us." "No," I said, stepping back inside. "You're done with me." I closed the door. Not a slam. A soft, final click. For the first time in years, I felt no guilt. The silence that followed closing the door behind my parents was both terrifying and liberating. I felt like I'd stepped off a cliff into nothingness, but it was my nothingness. My own space to breathe, think, and rebuild. I wasn't sure what came next, but for the first time in a long time, I knew it wouldn't be defined by their decisions. The next few days were a blur of exhaustion and relief. I stayed home, letting the quiet sink in. The kitchen table became my command center, littered with bills, letters, and unopened mail from the bakery. Each envelope was a reminder of everything I'd left behind, but also the mess they'd inherited. My phone stayed mostly silent, which was a relief, except for one unexpected message, an email from Claire Marston. "Hey Leora, I just wanted to check in. I've been thinking about you. If you want to talk, coffee's on me." Her words felt like a lifeline. We met the next day at a small cafe downtown, the smell of fresh coffee and baked goods wrapping around us like a warm blanket. Claire listened without interruption as I shared my story, the betrayal, the loss, the weight of being unseen despite everything I'd given. "You're stronger than you know," she said softly when I finished, her eyes shining with genuine care. "And don't forget, people see you, not just the ones who took you for granted." Her words stuck with me, settling into the cracks that had formed in my heart. Maybe I wasn't invisible. Maybe this was a chance to step into the light not as the dependable daughter, but as me. But stepping into that light meant facing the fallout. Rumors had already begun swirling around town. I heard through a friend at the credit union that my parents were 3 months behind on property taxes. A foreclosure notice had been mailed to their house. No one was bailing them out, not even Callie. It was a strange feeling. Part of me wanted to feel triumphant, but mostly I felt detached. They had made their choices, and I'd simply stepped away from the safety net. One afternoon, I sat in my small apartment, scrolling through social media when a flood of notifications appeared. Comments, texts, messages, all from people asking what had happened to the bakery, questioning the family drama, gossip swirling faster than I could keep up with. Among them, the sharpest sting came from a private message. "How could you do this to your family after all they've done for you?" I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, but I didn't respond. This was their narrative, and I didn't have to live it. Instead, I took a deep breath and drafted a message to myself, an affirmation, a reminder. "You did your best. You showed up when no one else would. You chose yourself. That's strength." The message stayed unsent, but I read it over and over. Weeks passed. I slowly started picking up the pieces of my own life. I baked again, not for the bakery, not for anyone but me. Early mornings in my tiny kitchen, the scent of yeast and rosemary filling the air. I needed dough like I was kneading out the past. Orders began trickling in, not from the bakery's usual customers, but neighbors and friends who remembered the love and care I put into every loaf. One day, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Leora, we never understood your worth. We see it now. It's too late." I stared at the message, feeling a mixture of emotions, not joy, not sadness, but a strange sense of closure. For the first time, I realized I didn't need their validation. Their recognition was no longer mine to seek. I didn't reply. Instead, I poured myself a cup of tea and returned to my dough. That night, I lay awake, the ceiling above my bed blank and white. Memories tumbled through my mind, cold winter mornings when I'd slept in the bakery's storage room because the pipes froze, missed birthdays, canceled plans, and every sacrifice made in silence. But also moments of quiet pride, the customers who smiled, the regulars who came back week after week, the joy in the simple act of creating something with my hands. I realized then that family, like love, was supposed to be mutual. It wasn't supposed to be a one-sided sacrifice or a silent suffering. It was a choice. I chose me. Months later, the bakery was still closed, the damage unrepaired, the bills unpaid. I heard through the grapevine that Callie had moved back to LA, chasing a new dream, leaving the family business and its mess behind. I wasn't angry anymore, just resolved. One afternoon, I received a letter from the family attorney. It confirmed the estate's new plan. Callie was the sole heir to all family properties and assets. My name was nowhere to be found. It was a final cut. But it didn't hurt like it once would have. I folded the letter carefully and placed it on my kitchen table next to a freshly baked loaf of bread. This was my life now, not the one they planned for me, but the one I was building. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. The days grew longer, but the weight on my shoulders started to lighten. I traded the suffocating silence of betrayal for the quiet hum of possibility. I had nothing left to lose. And in that, I found a strange kind of freedom. I kept baking, pouring myself into the rhythm of flour and yeast. I posted pictures of my sourdough on social media, shy at first, then with growing confidence. Loaves for sale, I'd write, made with love and patience. Orders trickled in at first, then more. Neighbors, old friends, even strangers found their way to my little kitchen, drawn by the smell of fresh bread and the story behind it. One morning, Claire dropped by with a basket of wildflowers and a smile that felt like sunshine. "You're doing great, Leora," she said, setting the flowers on my windowsill. "The town's talking. People remember you." Her support was a balm I hadn't realized I needed. We spent afternoons brainstorming ideas, maybe a pop-up shop, maybe a small bakery stand at the farmer's market. I hesitated at first, but Claire's belief in me was contagious. Then came the unexpected. One afternoon, as I was packing an order, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. I answered cautiously. "Leora Marchand," a woman's voice asked. "My name's Elise. I'm with a local news station. We've heard about your story, the bakery, the family drama, and we'd love to do a feature on you." I blinked, stunned. A media spotlight. Part of me recoiled. My story was raw, private, but another part of me knew this was an opportunity to tell my truth, to reclaim my narrative on my own terms. "Okay," I said after a long pause, "let's do it." The interview was nerve-wracking. The reporter asked about everything: my childhood, the bakery, the betrayal, the fight to keep my dignity. I didn't hold back. I spoke honestly about sacrifice and heartbreak, about feeling invisible and finding strength in loss. When the story aired, the response was overwhelming. Messages poured in, strangers offering words of encouragement, others sharing their own stories of family struggle and resilience. A small bakery in a small town had become a beacon for those who felt unseen. But not everyone cheered. Callie's social media blew up with backlash. She posted angry replies, calling me selfish and ungrateful. Our parents stayed silent publicly, but their absence was deafening. One afternoon, a letter arrived, no return address, just my name. Inside was a thick packet of documents, a formal cease and desist from the family's attorney. They demanded I stop using the family name in any business dealings, threatened legal action if I sold anything branded with Marchand. I read the letter twice, anger bubbling beneath the surface. They wanted to erase me completely, not just from the family legacy, but from any claim to my own hard work. But I wasn't backing down. I hired a lawyer, a sharp woman named Claudia, who believed in my case from the start. She told me I had grounds to fight. My baking was mine, my recipe, my sweat. The family name wasn't a trademark they could simply wield like a weapon. The legal battle was draining, but it gave me a new purpose. Each call, each document, each hearing was a step toward reclaiming my voice and my right to exist on my own terms. Meanwhile, the bakery was flourishing, my small operation growing steadily. I expanded from loaves to pastries, held baking workshops, and even started a blog about the art and therapy of baking. People were hungry not just for bread, but for stories of perseverance and quiet strength. One night, as I closed up shop, my phone buzzed, a text from Callie. Leora, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Can we talk? I stared at the message, heart pounding. After everything, was this real? Was she reaching out for reconciliation? Or was it another game? I didn't reply right away. Instead, I sat with the silence, weighing the years of hurt and sacrifice. Forgiveness was a path, not a destination, and I wasn't sure I was ready to walk it, but I was no longer the girl who stayed silent. The next morning, I sent a simple reply. Let's talk. Meeting her with strange, awkward smiles, hesitant words, she told me about her struggles in LA, the pressures of living in my shadow, the mistakes she'd made. I listened. I told her my side without bitterness, only honesty. It wasn't a fairy tale reunion. There were no grand apologies or tearful embraces, but it was a start, a fragile bridge built on truth and the hope that maybe family could mean something different now. Months passed, and with Claire's help, I found my footing not just as a baker, but as a woman who finally saw her own worth. The town's whispers shifted from pity to pride. My story wasn't just about loss, it was about standing tall after being knocked down, about choosing yourself when no one else will. One crisp autumn morning, I stood on my porch, the scent of apple pie baking in the oven, and watched the sun rise over the fields. I wasn't just Leora Marchand, the dependable daughter lost to family drama. I was Leora, the woman who baked her own path, one loaf at a time. And that was enough.